So this video will show you how you can use Google Sheets to store data and analyze it and create graphs and averages and other helpful things like that. So you can either use a waffle to get to Sheets, or if you want to make a blank spreadsheet, you can type in sheet.new or sheets.new. And this is what a blank spreadsheet looks like. It's very similar to Microsoft Excel with lots of the same functionality. But with the added benefit that it's online, so you can share it and collaborate with people in exactly the same way as you would with a Google Doc or slide presentation. So here's a spreadsheet with some dummy data in it. So imagine that I've got some students here and they've been taking tests in history and these are their scores. But it's quite hard just looking at these numbers to see any kind of patterns or notice anything about it. And in the Google exam, it might have a similar spreadsheet to this and it will ask you to do a few things. So for example, it might ask you to find the average of some of this data. So maybe I want to find the averages of a particular test to find out which test was the students found the most difficult. Or maybe I want to find out the average of individual students to see how they're doing overall. So that's what I'm going to do first. And to find the average, up here on the right, there's a function symbol, and I can have a look down here. The first few are like the main ones you'll probably use most of the time, like sum to add things up or average. But there are hundreds of different functions that you probably will never use, but some of them are actually quite useful. But anyway, we won't look at those now. I'm going to go to average, and when I click that, it asks what values do you want, or what range do you want to find the average of. So I could type in B2, which is the first cell here with 57 in it for Johnny, B2 up to F2, or the easiest thing to do is to just actually click and highlight the numbers that you want to find the average of, and then when you're done you can just press enter and it's found the average of those test scores for me. If I want, up here I can decrease the decimal places, so if I don't want decimals, you don't need to do this in the exam, it doesn't ask you to, but if you ever have data and you find the average and it has maybe like recurring numbers and you want to get rid of them, you can do that up here and it just rounds the number for you. So that's one way to find the average. Another way is to just type in the equals and then average, and it started doing this now. It kind of uses artificial intelligence to predict what it is you might want to do. It doesn't always get it right, but here it has. It's saying, do you want to do the average of B3 to F3? So I might click that and say yes. And you could do that individually, but I've just dragged that down. There's a much easier way to do that, and that is once you've found the average in one cell, you can copy that formula down by going to the bottom right of the cell. There's a small kind of blue square there, and when I click that and drag it down, it will copy the formula into the cells that I drag it to. And what's clever is it automatically adjusts the formula to match the row that you're on. So that's from B4, which is Jamie, and then the next one is B5. So that's really helpful. I just want to make those all without decimals. I might put in a title here, average. So now I can see a bit more clearly that Jamie has been getting my highest scores on average, and Regibald needs to do a bit more work on his history. So another thing it might ask you to do in the exam is to sort the data depending on one of these columns. So let's imagine I want to sort it based on the average. So, because I could sort it based on test 1 and see, put them in order, who got the highest to lowest score, or for test 2, so different columns. But in this case, I'm going to do it based on column G, which is the average. So I want it to be in order of maybe the students who I need to focus most on at the top and the ones that are doing the best at the bottom. So I'm going to go to data. So I've highlighted the column. I don't think you need to highlight the column. As long as your cell is in there, it says it's in column G. So I'm going to sort the sheet by column G, and you can either do ascending or descending. So I'm going to go from ascending. So the lowest scores will be at the top. But when I do that, it puts it in ascending order, starting with 67 with Regibald. But it moves the titles down to the bottom, which I didn't want it to do. So what you need to do in this situation is freeze the top row so that it doesn't move when you sort it. And again, it might ask you to do this in the exam. And there's a few ways you can do that. You can just go to View and then freeze one row, and then it will freeze that top row for you, so that now if you sort it ascending, it keeps the top row there and it won't move. And again, you might want to freeze the names column so that as you're scrolling along, the names always stay there. A shortcut to do that is to just, here you can see there's a kind of a thick grey line in the top right. If you drag that, then that will actually freeze that column for you as well. So now as I scroll along, if I've got lots of test scores, or as I'm going down, if I've got lots of students' names, I can always see what the titles are. And again, you can move that and do it from here rather than going to freeze. So now I've organized the data and I can see that I need to work more with these students, or at least these students are getting lower scores. And I want to look at this data visually now. So I want to create a chart. And the way you do that is you can either highlight all the data that you want to put into the chart, or just make sure you've selected a cell that's within that range. And then there's an icon over here called Insert Chart, or you could go to Insert Chart. It does the same thing. And when you click that, it will automatically create a chart for you using that data. And then this chart editor pops up at the side where you can tweak it and choose the type of chart you want. But normally it suggests it for you, and you can customize it if you like. But I'm just going to close that. In the exam, I wouldn't recommend spending ages trying to customize the chart, because you don't really need to. So here, this chart now, it kind of gets in the way a bit and I want it to be a bit bigger, so it might ask you to move it to its own sheet. And the way you can do that is by going to the three dots inside the chart itself, so that it doesn't get in the way of all the data. So you can only select the three dots once you've clicked it and highlighted it. So if I go to the three dots, there's a button that says Move to Own Sheet. And if I click that, now down at the bottom, sheet 1 is where all the data is, and then chart 8, this is where the chart is in its own sheet. And now I can see visually the data it's a bit easier to understand. So I can see that Regibald, he's quite consistent. His scores don't vary that much. They're around about the 70 mark. I can see Johnny has good days and bad days. He's a bit hot and cold. So it's just a bit easier for me to see. Just a tip, again, this isn't in the exam, but if I wanted to maybe just see how did they get on with their average score, and I want it with their name as well, because if I just do a chart now, it will show me the averages, but I don't know who's who. So I'm going to delete that chart. You can highlight some data, and then if you press Control or Command, depending on what computer you're using, you can highlight two different ranges at the same time. Now when I click Create a Chart, it gets their average and it tells me who's got that score as well. So that could be quite useful. So the last thing it might ask you to do is to share that with someone. And again, we've covered sharing. So I hope that was useful. There's some tasks again beneath this video that you can have a go at, that include the sort of things that we've just looked at. And I know some teachers find sheets the scariest part of the Google exam because perhaps you're not as used to it. But once you have a practice and you have a play around with some of the different tools, this can be really, really useful as a teacher for analysing data and seeing which students might need more help. So good luck, and thanks for watching.